Believe it or not, we're already underway with the Micah Parsons drama, but I'm here to urge Cowboys Nation to take Dak Prescott's advice on this one. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Monday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central, and catching up with you Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays with quick-hitting videos such as this one. There's something that I wanted to talk about since yesterday, but honestly, I wanted to focus more on the game, and that's something that happened a few hours before the game versus the Panthers even started, and that is the whole conversation about the Micah Parsons contract. And the reason why it became a topic on Sunday was that Ian Rappaport from NFL Network published a story after talking to Stephen Jones about the situation and getting some quotes on the mindset of the Cowboys regarding Micah ahead of a key contract negotiation this upcoming offseason. We know it's been coming, right? The Cowboys handled the negotiations with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb in 2024. And in the back burner, there was always Micah, always waiting, always waiting. Well, in 2025, you know he won't be waiting anymore. It's his time to step up to the plate and negotiate with the Jones family. This is what we've been building up to, and we're already getting started. The season is not even over, but the comments, the quotes with the media, we're already underway. And that kind of pisses me off. I'm not going to lie to you, because I wish we could still focus on football for a little longer and we could still talk about these games. But hell, the Cowboys are 6-8, which I think makes all of this much more relevant. You got to find something to talk about with the Cowboys, I guess, which is why NFL Network dropped that report and gave us all of this to talk about. I do want to say, and I want to preface all of my comments on the matter with this. I'm not buying any of what is trying to be sold out there, because I'll read you the quotes here in a moment, but I feel like the way the media has been trying to frame it since the article dropped is, oh, the Cowboys didn't rule out a potential Micah Parsons trade. And technically, Stephen Jones did not go out there and say, a la Nick Saban, I'm not going to, so quit asking. It wasn't that strong of a response. But I also, and I've been highly critical of Stephen Jones, but I also think the media is overreacting a little bit to the quotes given out by Stephen Jones over the weekend. Let me tell you what was said. And let me say also, even Micah was asked about this post game after his 2-sack performance versus the Panthers. And Micah was faced with the questions of, well, what do you think of the Cowboys that they have not ruled out the fact they could trade you? And Micah is faced with that post game, and he's forced to be all political and be like, well, I understand the business side. I want to say here, but I understand the business side. So yeah, I think it's been taken too far. I wanted to talk a little bit about it, and now we'll get to the quotes from Stephen Jones. So first off, I want to say at one point, Stephen Jones said, "We love Micah. I can't imagine there's a scenario where he's not wearing a star on his helmet." I read that quote and I'm like, well, this is a non-story, right? Like, Steven didn't say anything wrong. We're fine. We shouldn't be making a big deal out of this. And even still, and I love Rappaport, I really do, but even still, the way that he frames it on NFL Network, it's like he didn't exactly rule it out. But the quote is, I cannot imagine a scenario where he's not wearing a star on his helmet. So I think we've been pushing it too far, basically. To be fair, here's more aspects of the Stephen Jones quote. One of them was, and I think this might be the critical one. Obviously, this is Stephen Jones on Micah. Obviously, we're totally all in on Dak and CD, but after that, then you still shape things, including Micah. And he said, you don't do well in this league letting guys like Micah usually leave the house, right? And this was enough. This was enough for Micah to be asked about it. This was enough for the both national and local media to make a big deal out of it. And I'm here to read you Dak Prescott's words from last offseason, where he simply said, I stopped honestly listening to things Jerry Jones has to say to the media a long time ago. It doesn't really hold weight with me. We should be taking that advice and applying it to both of the Joneses. We should be applying it to Jerry and we should be applying it to Steven. And now, in Steven's defense, again, I do think he didn't really say anything wrong this time. And again, I've been highly critical of him, but I think this is mostly on the media. But even if you want to argue that Stephen Jones framed it in a way where he was leaving the door open for that trade, man, I'm not buying into the drama this time around. Here's what I think. I think the Cowboys in no world are gonna leave the team. I think the contract extension is almost a guarantee, and it might take us the full 2025 offseason to get there, just like it did with CD and Dak. But I don't see how this Cowboys franchise lets Micah Parsons walk out of that door. I believe that in multiple ways. Number one, Micah is too much of a star for them to do so, right? Micah is legitimately one of the best defensive players in football, and I don't believe they will want to become the franchise that let him get away. That's number one. Number two, and some people might bring up the whole Herschel Walker trade and all that, but we live in a different time. And I don't think that the Cowboys front office is proactive enough to try to pull off a Tyreek Hill-esque situation. And I mentioned Tyreek Hill because he's one of the few non-quarterbacks that I remember that was recently traded for a haul of draft picks. The Chiefs did so in a very aggressive move to try to rebuild the defense. And what did they do with the picks that they got? They basically built the defense that they're still playing today, and it's a high-quality defense. You could argue one of the most consistent units in the NFL for the last 2-3 years, right? And they did so by getting McDuffie, George Karlaftis, and a lot of those picks were from the Tyreek Hill trade. The Cowboys, in theory, could look at that scenario, and we could be having a conversation about, well, hey, could the Cowboys maybe trade away Micah and use these draft picks if they get a haul in exchange of number 11? And maybe we could argue that, yes, it could be the best way forward. That's way too proactive to the things that the Cowboys do. I'm not saying they should trade him, by the way. I do believe they should keep him around. I believe Micah is that special. He's not the kind of player you want to trade away. But even if the Cowboys thought that, hey, maybe we should do it, I don't see them going through with it. This is a long way to say, hey, just don't buy into the Micah Parsons drama just yet. I would argue don't even buy into it this offseason like we did with the Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb stuff. Just, it's going to take time because they are going to want us to keep talking about it for most of 2025. And then they're going to do it. They're going to take care of it. Now, keep in mind, this is also a little bit different than with the Dak thing because they could franchise tag him in 2026 if they wanted him to. They could franchise tag him again in 2027 if they wanted to get all hostile. So it's not really nearly as urgent as the Dak Prescott deal was. And even with CD, we were like, there's a level of urgency because next year you got to handle Micah. And now that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to me that Micah is like the last of the big three. And I know people are going to be like, well, what about Oza? I saw somebody on Twitter say, what about Tyler Smith? And I think those are fine players. Those are very good players. But the big three was always Dak, CD, and Micah because of the positions that they play, because of the contracts that they were looking at. So I think, those guys are going on a different conversation. So yeah, take Dak Prescott's advice and just don't put a lot of weight on whatever Jerry and Stephen say, especially if it's in December of 2024. Still have a long way to go. But anyways, that's on the Micah Parsons front. I also wanted to get into the Trevon Diggs injury news. And let me tell you something about the Trevon Diggs injury news. They do have a big financial impact. But let me ask you this. Are you betting on Trevon Diggs to be ready by the start of the 2025 NFL season? The reason why I ask you this is that Stephen Jones went on the radio. They're talking about an 8-month recovery, cartilage issue for Trevon Diggs. And there is a problem of, will he be ready by training camp? And Stephen Jones seemed to suggest that he will be. Let me ask you, is your confidence high or low in Trevon Diggs being back for training camp? and I'll get into the financial impact of his injury. But before we do any of that, though, let me talk to you about our friends over at Texas Card House, where the thrill of the game meets the excitement of the community. Check out Texas Card House in any of their 6 Texas locations, and what you will get is the perfect blend of luxury, sophistication, and camaraderie for any poker aficionado. That goes whether you're just starting out or maybe you are a seasoned pro. Go check out Texas Card House, and when you get there, make sure you bring up A to Z Sports, and you can get a free month of membership and 2 free hours to play poker. That is valid only at the Las Colinas and Dallas venues. But make sure you go check out Texas Card House. And back to the show. Now, here's the thing about Trevon Diggs. I have my doubts about him being fully ready to go by the 2025 NFL season. Plus, those injuries, they're stacking up. This is different from the ACL issue, but suddenly I could see the Cowboys being totally cautious with Trevon Diggs. And I know some people, like, for example, Clarence Hill from Old City Dallas was reporting that, hey, he might miss the entire 2025 season. And I could totally see that being the case with how serious the injury sounds. But here's what really catches my attention, and that is the contract side of it. Because the injury has a big time impact on whatever the Cowboys are gonna want to do with them. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by sharing my screen with you and looking at the over the cap contract page for Trevon Diggs. Give me just a second while I figure this out. Let's ignore the Sonic ad. There you go. So here's what I see. We're looking at 2025 here, right? So in 2025, and you can tell me how beautiful my handwriting is with this little app here. But this is the key part. So this is the base salary, which is guaranteed for injury. It's $9 million. If you cut Trevon Diggs, because you might be in a situation where you're like, well, I don't know if I'm going to get him in 2025 at all, so I'm going to cut him. You would open up $1.5 million in cap savings. Keep in mind, that's a very low number. That is an absolutely very low number, especially when you consider the dead money, which would be this, $12.75 million. Now, you might say, well, what if they, just hear me out for a second, what if they cut him with a post-June 1st designation? Then the math changes a lot, and you're looking at a $10 million cap saving with a 4.25 amount in dead money. Well, that sounds just about great. We could cut Trevon Diggs if we don't think he's going to be ready, and we can save $10 million. Well, the problem is you cannot do that, essentially. The reason why is this $9 million goes from being guaranteed for injury to being fully guaranteed if he's still on the roster by the 5th day of March. So by definition, you cannot use the post-June 1st designation. It's got to be pre-June 1st, right? And I'm going full dyslexic here with the way that I'm writing, but I'm sorry about that. That means that the Trevon Diggs injury essentially means that the Cowboys have closed the door on cutting Trevon Diggs, in my opinion, unless they want to do the $12 million dead money charge, which I highly doubt that they would do that. Based on how the Cowboys do things with the salary cap, they're never going to want to carry a $12 million cap hit for a player that's not on the roster anymore. But he cannot cut him post-June 1st. So essentially, if the Cowboys wanted to look at the possibility of trading him away, I think that door is shut now, and there is no way they would do it. That's my take on the Trevon Diggs injury. So it has a major impact football-wise and financially-wise, kind of closes some versatility there the Cowboys might have looked at, some possibilities, if you will. But anyways, that will be it for me tonight here on the show. And I'll be back tomorrow with more Cowboys content. And of course, remember, on Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, we've got a live show. So make sure you check out. Have a great Monday. Bye-bye.